Thanks for welcoming me with beautiful music and smiles. I'm already learning from the customs of this particular church. I'll start with a story. One day, I met a woman in a park, and we became best friends. The end. It's a very short story, and while the living of it might have been interesting, it's actually not a very interesting story. So I'll tell a slightly longer version. When my husband and I lived in the United States in North Carolina, we heard one day about a new Jewish religious group that was forming. A small group that we call in Hebrew a chavurah, which means something like literally a fellowship group or like a church meeting in someone's living room. And we heard that they were kind of funky and did creative and interesting things, so we wanted to check them out. We heard they were having a celebration in a public park for the holiday of Shavuot. Shavuot is the Jewish holiday that in Christian tradition is understood as Pentecost. At Pentecost, you celebrate the Holy Spirit coming down and inspiring the apostles. At Shavuot, we celebrate the revelation coming from God in the form of the Ten Commandments. And just again, to make another long story short, you know the story. The Israelites have left Egypt. With the help of Moses, God reveals the Ten Commandments to them. And then perhaps to illustrate how difficult it is for Moses to preach to a group of normal, ordinary people who believe the last thing they heard on television. He disappears for a few days to commune with God. They build the golden calf. They worship it. Moses comes down. He's angry. He breaks the stones. And they have to receive the Ten Commandments all over again. This funky and interesting group is having a party for Shavuot in the park. So with our 1-year-old, my husband and I drive way, way out into the suburbs, and we find ourselves in the amphitheater where the party is going to happen. We have arrived very early because having a 1-year-old, we have to leave very early. And I am simply following around my 1-year-old as she toddles around the amphitheater. There are very few people there, but we come upon a piñata spray-painted gold. And of course, my 1-year-old is all over this piñata. She wants to touch it, she wants to smell it, she wants to get her mouth near it. So of course I say, "You can look, but don't touch." And then a woman I've never seen before comes over and says in a very thick southern accent, which I cannot reproduce here, says to my daughter, "Of course you can touch it, honey. We're just gonna burn it." And I must have looked shocked, and I was actually, being a very new parent, shocked that someone would overturn and undercut my parenting decision that my child should not touch that. But the woman was very kind, and she at least pretended to interpret my shocked face differently. And she said, "Oh, it's the golden calf." And then she walked away. A few months later, our paths crossed again, our paths crossed again, our paths crossed again, and again. Turned out we had many, many common interests, but very, very different personalities. You could see already I had the rigid parenting style. She had the chaotic parenting style. Her name was Donna, and over the course of several years, we became the kinds of close friends whose lives were intertwined. And what we actually liked the most about each other was how different our personalities were. Donna was the woman of practical wisdom. She knew how to do everything, from decorating a cake to making a quilt. She was a nurse practitioner. She was a Hebrew school teacher. You could put Donna down in a foreign country where she did not speak the language, ask her to organize a dinner for 50 with no budget, and 3 days later, 50 hungry people would be fed. This was Donna. I used to call her the most resourceful person I know. What she really loved about me was that I live lost all the time in my thoughts and feelings. I'm a very empathetic listener. I give very sparing and well-chosen words of advice. I can relate any idea to any other idea. If you're a teacher and you need to plan a program, I'll give you a great idea in 4 seconds. She was the woman of practical wisdom. In my eyes, in her eyes, I was the woman of intellectual wisdom. If you were to put the two of us together, you might get the magnificent woman of wisdom, woman of worth, woman of valor, who is celebrated in chapter 31 of the book of Proverbs, the magical woman who can do anything. But we were not magical, just real people, and so each of us was barely a half of the woman of wisdom. Keep the woman of wisdom in mind. Today we read a really short story from the book of Acts. Paul, Silas, and Timothy meet a woman. Her name is Lydia. She gets baptized. They go to her house. It's a very short story. And even though it's a lot of verses for a woman character to get in biblical literature, it's a pretty short story, and when I hear it, it really leaves me wondering. The text says that Lydia worshiped God, and her heart was open, but what was it about her that made her so receptive to a new spiritual message? What was it about her that caused Paul to focus his attention and words on her? In the context of the story, she's the first convert that the apostles make in that area of Europe called Asia Minor then and Turkey now. What's so significant about Lydia being the first convert? Why, if they're going to give us only one detail about her life to visualize her with, why do they tell us that she sells purple cloth? And why does she invite these guys she met in the park to her home? What was it like in her home? What did the apostles experience when they were received there? I want to know all of these things because I'm pretty hungry for information about women characters and filling in the gaps around the histories of significant women. There are some different ways that we could go to fill in those gaps and make this short story longer and more interesting. One thing we could do, of course, is to enter the story in our imagination. Imagine perhaps that we are Lydia. And visualize ourselves hearing this compelling preaching from people whom we've never met, being so moved that we say, I'm joining your group, come on over to my house, and fill in the details that our own story would generate. But actually, We don't have to use that method. We can use a different method that the author of Acts and Luke hints at for us, or maybe I should say pretty much throws into our face. And that method is what biblical scholars call intertextuality. Do we use that word here a lot? Okay, good. Intertextuality. People like the word because it sounds like sexuality, but it's really different. It's a book thing. Some people have ecstatic experiences reading books, so maybe I shouldn't dismiss intertextuality too quickly as an exciting experience. Intertextuality happens when one book enters into a conversation with another book. Or really, when the author of a new book writes in a way that hints at a story in an older book. If you are reading the new book and you've also read the older book, then you get so much more out of the new story because you bring the whole background of the old book with you as you're reading. And if you have read the new book and you go back and reread the old book, why, you see so many more possibilities in it because you now see the new story in it as well. The author of Acts is using one really significant detail in the story to give us big hints about who Lydia is. The detail is Lydia is a dealer in purple cloth. How many biblical women are there who have anything to do with purple cloth besides Lydia? There is one. She is the wise woman of Proverbs 31. She's the woman who has every practical skill there is. She can spin, she can weave, she can cook. She's a great manager. She's got all the executive skills. She runs her household like clockwork. She manages the family's money. She's got every intellectual skill there is. She teaches. She gives advice. She's a spiritual giant. And even more, her husband and her children adore her. She makes her own clothing, and it's purple. Sometimes people ask me, why do you wear purple so often? It's because I aspire to be that woman of wisdom. We all know that you don't achieve it just by wearing the clothes, but I'm trying. The woman of wisdom, Proverbs 31, wears purple, just like Lydia. How can the woman in Proverbs 31 do all those things? I know the book of Proverbs says that she stays up all night. It truly does. You should go back and read it because it is funny as well as heart-opening. How can this woman do so many things? The answer is she's not a real woman. Maybe she is, but she's also not a real woman. She is instead the apotheosis, the physical realization of cosmic divine wisdom. The kind of wisdom that we heard about in the reading from Proverbs chapter 8 that was delivered so beautifully and in context. She is the embodiment of the kind of wisdom that not only was with God at the time of creation, is a part of God, but the kind of wisdom that stands out in public places, at the gates of the city in biblical language, and calls to people. The kind of wisdom that in our language stands out on the sidewalk, in the shopping mall, at the homeless shelter, in front of the church, at the baseball game, the marathon, and calls to people and says, "Notice me. I'm actually everywhere. If you notice me and hear my call, you will learn to be intelligent. You will learn to be good. You will learn to be truthful. You will learn to be spiritually aware. But you have to open up your eyes and see me. You have to open up your ears and listen to me. I'm a hint of the divine. I'm a hint of what uplifts all of us. The teaching I have is more precious than anything material or physical. You have to notice me. If you read this back into the story of Lydia, using your skills of intertextuality, you see that Lydia, the first convert in that region, is no ordinary woman. Lydia herself is a realization of wisdom. She is the wise woman whose home is a fount of knowledge, welcoming to rich and poor alike, filled with love, filled with knowledge, and a representation of all the goodies and rewards that cosmic wisdom brings. Lydia is not just a recipient of the teaching that Paul and company have to bring. She is also the wisdom and the inspiration that they need in order to carry out their mission in this new place. On the surface level, they have a message that they are bringing to a new continent. On the deeper level, once you understand the depth of who Lydia is, on the deeper level, they have now set foot in a new country, and they are receiving the wisdom and the spirituality that that country and its people and its women have to offer them. So why is the story told in such a sparing way? Why don't we get any of these details about Lydia and about the apostles receiving wisdom and new inspiration in turn? I believe it's because we're hearing the story from the apostles' point of view. They are so consumed with their mission and what they have to offer that they aren't even aware of how much they are receiving themselves in this interaction with the other, the foreigner, the woman, the person just newly hearing their message. And in that is a message for all of us. How often do we miss wisdom's call? How often are we so occupied by giving, by being good, by doing things for other people, that we miss what we are receiving in the interaction? How often does it happen, for example, that human beings miss the wisdom of animals? How often does it happen that adults miss the wisdom of teenagers? How often does it happen that managers miss the wisdom of their employees? Or that men miss the wisdom of women? That the wealthier miss the wisdom of the poorer? I believe that the story of Lydia, in all its depth and complexity, is a reminder to us that even when we are offering out of goodness, out of wisdom, we always need to have our hearts open also to receive wisdom and to understand that every spiritual encounter is a circular flow. Not only us giving to others, but also us receiving from others. That's the wisdom that Lydia has to offer. I want to invite you all to join us at the Vancouver School of Theology, May 15th to 17th, for the 2-day conference that we're having on the theme of encountering the other. Sunday night, May 15th, if you can come, hear our guest speaker, Dr. Mark Gopin, who is director of the Center for World Religions, Diplomacy, and Conflict Resolution at George Mason University. Hear him talk about the idea of empathy and how empathy requires a two-way flow between human beings. And if you don't remember the details, they're in the bulletin. After you hear Dr. Gopin speak, you will begin to look at the world through the eyes of Lydia's story. No longer will you miss the hints of wisdom and interaction and giving and receiving that are planted for us absolutely everywhere we go. After you hear Dr. Gopin, your hearts, eyes, and ears will be open to the call of the cosmic woman of wisdom. Thanks.